First up is a film called Mad God, and this is from Phil Tippett, who wrote and directed it. And also, if you're not familiar, Phil Tippett is probably one of the more influential animators, particularly stop-motion animators of all time, short of Ray Harryhausen. Phil Tippett is the reason that the dinosaurs in the original Jurassic Park look amazing. He's the dinosaur supervisor. You had one job, Phil. And, he started a studio in Berkeley, and they do really amazing work. And this film has been a passion project. It's been in production for 30 years. I've been hearing about it since as long as I've been involved in animation. Not 30 years, but, I had been hearing rumblings about this film for a very long time. Had a Kickstarter, blah, 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 all this stuff. So finally, it is out. It's out on Shudder, which is a horror streaming service. And I will caveat, I am not a horror person. So this is already inherently probably not for me. But watching this movie made me feel sick to my stomach. And I feel like, I'm pretty sure it was intentional. Also, I don't think this qualifies as, I don't know, it's hard to analyze or critique this film in many senses. Like, the technical artistry is undeniably there. Some of the things that he accomplishes in stop motion, it's just very impressive, especially if you're familiar with how challenging it is to do some of this stuff like the old school way. You go, wow, Phil's got it still, and Phil and his team have got it still. Great, no questions asked there. But should this have been a feature film? Is there even a story in this movie? I don't think so. It's definitely, it's a bunch of really gross scenes strung together. And I almost feel like it would have been better if it had been released as a bunch of shorts, just really gross shorts that all take place in this mad world. In the beginning, there is sort of maybe a plot line involving some masked dude who shows up and has a mission. But then it devolves into showing off grotesque for grotesque's sake. And, animation is a medium. It's always still filmmaking, and so you can have different, it's not just child-friendly, blah, 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 like Disney cartoons, but sometimes I feel like he's just doing this because he knows he can, and he can get away with it because he's filtered. Like, if this film had not had his name on it, I think people would have ripped it to shreds. I think that there is and will be a subset of people who are like, yes, this is my jam, and I'm so happy for you that this film exists for you. But for the rest of us who don't like super grotesque, gnarly, bodily function involved, it's, just thinking about it is making me feel slightly queasy again. I mean, I guess, again, you have to go, okay, well, it's well done in that it accomplishes its goal of making me feel sick. I think that's its goal. But then you have to go, if that's the goal of a movie, like, what is going on? It's not even, like, body horror in the way that something like, I don't know, Crimes of the Future or The Fly or whatever, basically anything from Cronenberg's filmography. It's not that. It's, it's less than an hour and a half long, which is probably the best thing going for it. But I can't in good conscience recommend it. If you see the trailer or the bits for it and you're like, ooh, this looks like it's for me, that's great. It's probably for you because it's exactly what it delivers, and I probably should have known that going into it. But for everybody else who was maybe morbidly curious or on the fence or was like, oh, Phil Tippett's, an animation legend, blah, 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 no. Just no. That's it. It's going to be a no. Again, because it doesn't really have a story or character development or any of the things that you traditionally consider that go into a film as opposed to maybe like an experimental art piece. I as an experimental art piece, I suppose it would succeed. So I personally am only going to give this 2.5 out of 5. That Hiva rating is only because of the successful artistry, unfortunately successful artistry, and just respect, I guess, for his skills. But a writer-director does not seem like his strong suit. So 2.5 out of 5 for Mad God for me. The next thing I have this week is not a new release, but it is something that I just had stumbled upon. It's called Angelyne, and I had actually been hearing about who it is based on about a couple weeks before I saw the trailer or whatever it was that I was like, oh yeah, I should actually watch this show. So if you aren't familiar, Angelyne is supposedly the first person who was famous just for being famous. She was based in LA. She had all these billboards up in the city. And I had been told a story by some friends that they'd met her. And I don't know if I should be sharing this, but whatever. That she had tried to hire them to do work, but wanted to pay them in her merch. Obviously, they didn't do it, but this is her story, and she's a very modified-looking person. So then it turned out that Peacock made a limited series about her, and so I ended up watching it. It stars Emmy Rossum, who normally not a huge fan of. I'm not against her. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just am not like, yes, Emmy Rossum. Can't wait to see her in a project. It's also got Martin Freeman, Alex Karpovsky, and Hamish Linklater. And, I feel like they do a good job of capturing what I'd imagine Angelyne is like, and just sort of the drive she had for fame and stardom, and not necessarily have any skills. She just, her skills are that she was able to market herself, but, that she just wanted to be famous. Like, that was the goal. It's not that she doesn't want to be an actor or a singer necessarily, or whatever it is. She just wants to be known as Angelyne. So there's a voice. She does a voice. But I feel like it's actually very believable. At one point, I was like, is this dubbed? Or did Emmy Rossum actually do this voice? I guess she did the voice. It's very weird. There's also, they jump back and forth in time to modern day or present day, so all the characters are slightly older. And then, telling the story of her sort of height and rise of fame in the 80s. But I think, the aging makeup is decent. But there are times when I'm just like, oh no, you're trying, but there are just like little details that are off in terms of, it's hard to age somebody digitally or prosthetically. So anyway, it was an interesting story about a character / person who I didn't know a ton about and had just randomly been introduced to. I didn't grow up in LA, and I guess it's like she was a very hyper-local famous person and then achieved a slightly larger radius of fame. But it was just an interesting story that I hadn't heard before. I thought it was self-contained. There are some creative, surreal moments, and in contrast to Mad God, I feel like these surreal moments worked. Well, they didn't make me sick, so that's a win there. It's only 5 episodes long. It's on Peacock. I think it's worth checking out. And then the last thing I have is the new season of The Umbrella Academy, and this is another one of those Netflix shows where it starts out really strong, and I feel like they just lose the momentum as they go along. Same goes for Stranger Things, where I could not even get into whatever the current season is. I'm not invested. Umbrella Academy is actually a show I think I liked better than Stranger Things. It's about a group of siblings with superpowers. By siblings, I mean they are all adopted. They all have superpowers. They, each of them has different things, and they're constantly in peril or trying to save the world or whatever it may be. And there's time travel. There's all these things. But at this point, this is also probably a byproduct of things coming out in batches, and then you binge them, and then you just completely forget in the years that pass between seasons. So I'd completely forgotten what had happened in the last 2 seasons, and this is season 3, so that's kind of tough, but also just what they expect you to remember going into the new season is challenging in and of itself. And then the characters, the dynamic is starting to get a little fraught, and I'm just like, okay, this new season does introduce like a new group of characters to help try to alleviate that, but I don't know if it's fully successful. But I still think it's a decent show. I just wish that this season was as captivating as the previous 2 had been.